Martin, many thanks. Well, the IMF has demanded that America raises its debt ceiling and gets its finances under control for the sake of the global economy. The appeal comes after President Obama failed to reach agreement with congressional leaders over the weekend on measures to tackle the country's $14.3 trillion debt limit. We'll have the latest news on those negotiations in a minute. But first, here's Sen.Reid at the news wall with details of what's at stake.
Well, in the blue corner, the White House and President Obama. In the red, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives and its leader, John Boehner. Their fight is over the U.S. debt ceiling. That's how much money the government allows itself to borrow. It's currently set at $14.3 trillion, but the limit has already been reached. Now, normally, it's not a problem. Congress usually approves increases because if it doesn't, the government can't pay its debts and it runs out of money. Salaries go unpaid, government borrowing costs go up, and the whole economy suffers. But with an election approaching, there hasn't been the political will to agree. The Republicans, who control the House of Representatives, don't want to raise the debt ceiling without a plan to wipe $2.4 trillion off the deficit. That's the government's overdraft. The Democrats and President Obama here in the White House agree, but how they achieve that saving has turned into a major battle with time running out. Obama wants to impose more taxes on the rich and not cut spending. Republicans would rather cut spending. They want $1 trillion of cuts to healthcare and social welfare, big projects promised by Obama. And despite conceding some of that, a $650 million Medicare budget cut, President Obama has not managed to strike a deal with his Republican opponent. Neither side has escaped criticism from their own camps. The issues are domestic, but the consequences of failure would be felt all over the world.
If it was to default on its debt, then it's not just the US administration or the US government or US citizens that will suffer, but a lot of other countries, lots of other sovereign nations, including China, including those in the Middle East, are also invested in US sovereign debt. And whereas somewhere like Greece can be fairly well contained, it can be pushed out of the EU and can be left to the IMF to deal with, the US economy affects us all.
Well, 8 days to the deadline, and pressure is mounting on US lawmakers for a deal. Financial markets presume it will be done, mainly because the alternative is simply unthinkable.
We're going over to Washington now, where we have two very senior Democrat politicians, Chuck Schumer and Hary Reid, who are going to tell us about the latest on those negotiations over the debt ceiling.
So anyway, they're not here, but they're on their way. I spent all weekend trying to work something out with the Republicans. But instead of moving forward, we went backwards. Here's one example. You know, we are spending this year for the military about $700 billion. That's more money for the military than all the rest of the countries put together. So you would think in this debate that we have that the Pentagon could chip in a few bucks, cut some spending. Secretary Gates thinks they can. This weekend, the Republicans wanted to raise spending for the Pentagon. In the matter that we have on the floor, there's a cut for the Pentagon over the next 10 years. It's modest, something the Pentagon can live with. But over the weekend, lo and behold, they want more money for the Pentagon. So rather than trying to work with us on something as obvious as this, a way to save money, they went the wrong direction. What they're trying to do is force us to have the same debate on the exact same subject a few months from now. Republicans' short-term plan is a non-starter in the Senate and in the White House. And certainly the Democrats in the House agree wholeheartedly with us. A short-term agreement risks many of the same dire consequences that would be triggered by the default itself. As one market analyst said today, quote, "There is a significant risk of a downgrade with an agreement that ties further cuts to another vote only a few months down the road," close quote. It appears to me at this stage the Republicans are more interested in trying to embarrass the president than doing what's right for the country. So today we'll bring to the floor a $2.7 trillion reduction package that I hope can break the impasse and put the rest of the country at ease for the specter of this default. This proposal satisfies Democrats' core principles by protecting Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and providing the long-term extension of the debt ceiling that the markets are looking for. The bill also meets Republicans' demands, two major demands. It contains no revenues, and the amount of the cuts meets the amount of the debt ceiling increases. They wanted a one-for-one, that's what we've given them. So now all the Republicans have to do is say yes. Unfortunately, the Republicans who used to run the Congress on the two Republican caucuses are being driven by the radical right wing that is so in tune with the Tea Party. They want their leaders to ignore the American people as they're doing. They want their leaders to ignore the business leaders like the Chamber of Commerce that they're ignoring. And even a majority of Republicans around this country want something to happen, and they're refusing to do that.
That's Senator Hary Reid expressing his strong distaste for the hard line of some Republicans. Joining us from Washington is Sky's Robert Nisbet. Evening, Robert. It doesn't much sound like a breakthrough is in the offing.
That is the angriest I've heard, Hary Reid. You would be expecting in these kind of negotiations coming so close to the wire that the groups would be moving together somewhat and arguing over details. But it seems that there is still considerable disagreement over the broad principles. And we heard there what Hary Reid is saying, that he will now put to the Senate floor, which we assume will be voted through. The Democrats run the Senate. He's talking about $2.7 trillion reduction package. He's talking about a long-term extension, which would mean raising the debt ceiling high enough that it would take it past government spending past the presidential election in 2012. Significantly, they're giving way on no revenues, so they're talking about no extra tax increases, which he said is a key Republican demand. But this is where the problem is going to be. The Republicans want to have a constitutional amendment that Congress must always pass a balanced budget. Now, Republicans, certainly in this radical right wing that Hary Reid was talking about, say this is non-negotiable. So it may pass the Senate, it will have serious problems in the House of Representatives. And this is the problem we have. We have Democrats running the Senate, the Republicans running the House of Representatives. We have a president who say he's taking himself out of the equation entirely because talks with John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, broke down. So we still have significant differences of opinion here. And of course, time is running out.
All right, Robert Nisbet in Washington, many thanks. Let's switch over to New York, where I'm joined by John Bussey, the Assistant Managing Editor of the Wall Street Journal, who is also a columnist on the paper. Evening, John. Thank you for joining us. Intriguing. It does not sound as though the two sides are coming together, and yet the markets are refusing to price in a full-blown US default.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very interesting to watch Hary Reid at this moment when negotiations are supposed to be going on and you're supposed to be trying to find commonality with your opponent, really give a backhand to the Republicans. Fairly strong language there. The markets have somehow, for the moment at least, metabolized this. They figure that this is stagecraft, drama, showmanship in Washington, that eventually some kind of deal will be struck. And that's why you did not see the markets in Asia, Europe, the U.S. go off the cliff today, even though there were concerns about that over the weekend.
Yes, the dollar has softened a little bit, but equity markets are pretty stable.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that the investing public would be wise not to take that as a certainty. This could very easily go wrong. Washington is kind of walking right up to the brink. They're playing with fire at this point, because a default, the prospect of a default is so kind of horrendous it can't even be contemplated. I mean, the loss of confidence in American debt would create a ripple effect through financial markets around the world. But we can get something shy of that. That's still not good. If the ratings agencies decide that whatever deal is finally struck, I mean, we don't know what is in this $2 trillion plus package that Senator Reid is proposing. If the ratings agencies say, look, these are kind of false cuts or false savings, we really don't like this, you could get a downgrade of U.S. debt that would also play very, very badly in the financial markets.
When you say play badly, John, what could be the outcome?
Well, I think that you have a lot of financial managers that are required to hold AAA assets. And if for some reason U.S. debt is no longer AAA, falls to AA, they might have to unload, which would be a lot of selling pressure on the markets, which would be discomforting to the Chinese and many others, which might cascade into additional selling pressure and into reactions that we don't really fully understand. So I think that this is something that Geithner, the Treasury Secretary, has been cautioning against. I think that the Congress understands it. They have two proposals now, one that would likely be acceptable to the president, the other not. We're inching toward a solution, but they have to understand that they're racing not only against each other and against the clock, but against the financial markets, which at some point might lose patience with what's going on in Washington.
Exactly so. John Bussey, many thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time. And you can get more